What if I told you that you don't actually hate marketing, that you're just doing it backwards? In this video, what I'm going to take you through is the 4 constraints in any marketing campaign for any company. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you how to use that and apply it to our most successful organic lead nurturing campaign in the CrossFit space that we've ever made.
Welcome to the Best Hour of Their Day podcast with your hosts, Jason Fernandez
and me, Jason Ackerman. With more than 20 years in the business,
as both coaches and affiliate owners,
our passion is to help create world-class affiliates
and coaches by building
better boxes. Welcome to
the Best Hour of Your Day.
I'm Jason Fernandez, aka Fern, co-founder of Best Hour of Their Day podcast, where we produce content for affiliate owners and coaches. Over 700 podcasts, work with 1,000 affiliate owners worldwide over the last 4 years. And what I can tell you is I produced my first piece of content in 2008. And I started a YouTube channel called Jerk Block Talk. Produced 143 episodes on there before we ever started Best Hour. And all that to say, I have roughly 1,000 hours of me talking into camera. So what I have learned in that time frame, I'm going to try to take all of that information and give it to you to help make this big monster of social media and content creation much, much simpler, because it doesn't have to be nearly as challenging as you think it does. Okay, so let's start with this. You probably know that you should be making content, but you may have a love-hate relationship with content. I effectively own a media company, and I have a love-hate relationship with content in some regards. But what I will tell you is this. I've produced a lot of content. A lot of it is very bad content. If you want to go all the way back into the archives, you're going to see some really awful stuff that I've made in the past. That was all self-produced at that point, and then gotten better at it. And inside of that, what I'll also tell you is I spend an immense amount of time trying to figure out why things are hard for affiliate owners inside the affiliate space. Like I've told you guys before, I still own my affiliate, CrossFit Rife. I'm going on 16 years at this point. And a lot of times I'm just sitting around and thinking about, like, why does this thing suck, whatever it might be? So, for example, about 2 years ago, I was having the normal ass pain, if you will, with regard to getting apparel printed inside of the affiliate. So if you're an affiliate owner, and if you've been an affiliate owner for at least 5 minutes, you've already probably been through this pain cycle of trying to find a vendor to print your stuff, and then maybe they don't have the right colors, or it's delayed, or the print comes off really poorly. And I just sat around thinking, and I said, there's gotta be a better way to do this. And the way I like to think about solving problems is, why is that a problem, right? Not necessarily, I don't start necessarily with the solution. I want to start with what is the problem. So what I ended up doing, I spent about 20 hours on YouTube University, and figuring out that there's no reason that an affiliate owner can't own the entire process with regard to retail and apparel. Meaning, there's a way to set up your own Shopify store very easily. You can set up a process to create your own designs, like, very quickly. Print on demand is not nearly what it was 5 or 6 years ago. It's very reliable, and not to say there aren't mistakes made, but that you can control all the margins, right? You can run specials, create discount codes. This allows you to print one-off things that allow you to market your clients and create really unique designs for everybody inside of your gym and all of that, and you own the whole thing. So I spent a ton of time putting that together because it was a pain point for me. And I was tired of having so many people in between me and the outcome that I was looking for. So we put that together, we bundled that up, and we gave it to all the affiliate owners that we work with inside of Affiliate U. And people are crushing it in retail in that scenario. Like, some people are just doing $5,000, $6,000 a month in retail. Not because it's some magical process, but because we removed all of the middle people and we removed the friction inside of that process. Because at the end of the day, I want you guys to sell your apparel to your members, right? I love Rogue and all these other brands, but at the end of the day, you own your affiliate, and I want your members to wear your affiliate across their chest, not necessarily somebody else's brand. So I do the same thing, and I'm going to do the same thing for you guys here in marketing. So I have produced a fair amount of content in my day as an affiliate owner, as a coach. And what I'll tell you, in doing so, when I started creating content back in 2008, I think is when I launched the first episode of Jerk Block Talk. Much has changed in that time frame with regard to technology, the tools, and everything. Back then, if I could even begin to tell you the number of times that we did a recording that had no audio, or the file was corrupted, or we had to run through 7 different variations of lav mics. We had to get the right camera, and then the microphone wouldn't work on the camera. Just understand, like, back in the day, creating content was significantly more challenging than it is today, right? Getting gimbals and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, there's so many tools out there today that make this so easy to the point where you could have a full-blown professional setup, multi-camera, lighting, full podcast setup for probably $2,000 or less, and it would look pristine. Okay, so things have changed. Not only that, but they're a lot easier to use. So a lot of the tools, they integrate with each other a lot better. And my whole purpose to say is like the tools are getting better. You can shoot 4K on your phone these days. That was not a thing back in the day. So I want to walk through why creating media is really painful for everybody. And we're going to work through what I call the 4 constraints of marketing. So what are the 4 choke points inside of marketing that are going to cause you to not get the desired outcome that you want? So if you're thinking about either yourself or somebody else who's creating content, and a lot of times I'll do this. I'll see somebody who says they're going to start creating content, and then I'll just watch them. And they'll have an uptick in content, and then eventually it falls off. And in most instances, it falls off because they don't understand where the constraints are, and they don't understand where eventually this is going to break, at which point they won't produce the content anymore. Another example would be in the podcast world. Most podcasts, I believe it's something to the tune of 90%, never go past 1 podcast. If you happen to make it past 1 podcast, 90% of that group won't make it to 21. So how do I make it past 1? And then how do I make it past 21? And then ultimately, how do we create a system so that we're all on the same page and we can create the content that is in line with our brand, mission, vision, core values, and we can tell a unique story about our affiliate. And that's what I'm going to walk you guys through today via the 4 constraints of marketing. Okay, so let's do a really quick assessment. If you guys remember back to your level 1, when we did the What is Fitness lecture, we drew a Venn diagram for you, and we put 3 sports on there. It was probably something like wrestling, soccer, and curling or something like that, or something weird. And the point was, number 1, the overlap there in the middle is fitness, but also inside of that, the kind of hidden or subliminal message is that it becomes very easy for you to figure out which one of those you're weak at. So if we take that same concept of a Venn diagram and we put it here, and I put the 3 kind of major pillars of any business in here, I put sales, ops, and marketing. Immediately, what happens is you pick one that you're strong at, and then you pick one that you're weak at, right? So if I replace these with metabolic conditioning, weightlifting, and gymnastics, you're immediately going to have the same reaction. Like, hey, I'm really good at weightlifting. My gymnastics is a little, or vice versa, whatever it is. But I love this diagnostic tool because you can lie to me, but you can't lie to yourself. And most of us look at this and say, hey, like, I'm making some sales. It could be improved operationally, like things happen. Is it ideal? But then you look at marketing and you have the kind of like, wah, wah, like I kind of know what's going on there. So if you're ever looking to see like where you should maybe shore things up, really quick diagnostic tool, because again, very similar to if you go back and you guys look at the theoretical hierarchy for the development of affiliate. When we look at marketing again is akin to gymnastics. Now, what do I mean by it is equivalent to gymnastics? What I mean by that is like marketing is kind of ever evolving. It's highly complex and it takes a long time to get good at. However, if you spend the time doing that, there can be outsized return for developing that skill set. And the same thing in marketing, right? Sales, for the most part, ops, like most people can wrap their brain around getting better at those 2 things. Marketing is a big beast all in of itself, just like gymnastics when you go from like doing a frog stand to a planche, right? Like most people can't make the leap mentally about like how you would get from A to B there. And marketing feels the same in a lot of instances. So if that's you, no worries. I'm gonna start with baby steps here, and we're gonna start wading into the deep end here as we work through this process. Okay, before we dive into that, we have to ask the question is like, why do we make content? What is the purpose of that? So if we look at this kind of flywheel here, be like, why do we make content? Well, very simply, we just want to tell people about our stuff. So number 1, we want to create awareness around, we have a CrossFit gym. We have something that can impact your life. It can change your life. It can give you long-term health and wellness and happiness and a clan and all that kind of stuff we know. And then from there, I want to use that awareness to build my brand, right? To build authority inside of this space that I'm eventually going to monetize in some sort of way, shape, or form, right? And this is the circle that we're going to continue to go through. So when you're like, hey, why do I need to create content? This is why works, right? So this is why creating awareness to then build a brand, and then I'm going to monetize that at some point. You own a brick and mortar store, right? Which is a CrossFit affiliate. And remember, everything inside of the affiliate starts with a sale. If you never sell anything, you do not functionally have a business. Now, You didn't get into this business because you wanted to sell something, but understand selling something is a prerequisite for having a business. So how does this flywheel work and what are we doing it for is a really important component of that. Now, I will also tell you that I have run several experiments with regard to social media in my past. And because I'm always just curious, like if I do something, what happens? And if I don't do something, what happens? So you should make content. However, I would tell you in many instances, there is a point of diminishing return with the amount of content that you're making or the type of content you're making. And if you don't do it well, meaning it is not intentional and it is not unique to your brand, functionally, it's the same as not doing it all, is what I would tell you. Now, why do I say that? So maybe about a year and a half ago, I was also getting fed up with creating content and doing social media, and we just turned off social media handles at CrossFit Rec. Meaning we didn't shut them down, but we just didn't produce any content for, I believe it was 3 weeks, like no posts whatsoever in any direction whatsoever. And I said, I want to see what happens. And what I found out was that nothing happened. Okay. Now, why do I tell you that story? Not because you shouldn't post on social media channels and not because you shouldn't create content. I tell you that because unless you have a good plan, you should only be allocating an appropriate amount of time and energy to those channels to get content up there to show some presence inside of the space, right? Like minimal effective dose if we're thinking about this through the lens of training, right? And then at what point you have the time, energy, resources to plan this out, now you can create better content and you can get a better outcome with this. So, because again, there's the number of people that we have worked with that are spending an immense amount of time on social media trying to create content, but they're doing it blindly, meaning there's no plan behind it. There's no actual strategy with regard to content creation and the messaging. And I asked them, I was like, how many leads have you gotten off of that? What's the message that you're creating off of that? And the answer is always 0. So then it does beg the question is like, is that where I should be spending my time? And for a lot of business owners or for a lot of affiliate owners specifically, the short-term answer is no. They should not be spending their time there because that is a negative ROI. Not even just 0 ROI, it is a negative ROI, meaning there is time, energy, and resources going into that, and it has no return whatsoever. When I could take those resources and I can reallocate them to somewhere better, use would be training my staff, retaining my clients, paying better attention to the front end of the sales funnel. All of those things would be a better use of time, energy, and resources in many instances. But long term, right, if we're thinking about growing the best possible affiliate, you will need to solve this riddle. So I wanted to plant the seed for you guys today, and I'm going to walk you through the solution, or more importantly, like I want to help you understand why this breaks down over time so that you can start to think about how would you put the bumpers in place to make sure that when you do start to execute this, that you can execute it for the long term. Okay, so we're going to dive in. Okay, so we talked about like why you should be doing content marketing or what the overarching theme there is, but then we have to talk about like what is the outcome that we're looking for. And really what I'm saying is just like when I'm doing something like creating a marketing plan or creating content, it should be intentional in nature. So far too long for far too many of us, we were just blindly creating content and there was really no message behind the content. And the reason for that is it's pretty challenging. But when we think about content, the purpose of making any content whatsoever is to drive traffic. Now, traffic can be download my thing. It could be fill out this form and set up a consult. It could be buy my thing, right? Whatever, right? Whatever that is for you. But the purpose of making content is to drive traffic. Now, in a perfect world, all of this would be centered around value, right? We always want to provide value to the end user or to the person consuming. This is a huge component of what Gary Vee has been talking about for years, but value is super important. That's why we make these videos for you guys. That's why we decide we're going to go deep on these topics because like the purpose is to create value. Now, I'll also tell you, not shocking, like the purpose is to drive traffic for us, right? Like we want the opportunity to work with you guys if you think that is something that would be valuable to you. So, but first I need to provide value to you. And if you think about your CrossFit affiliate to people who are looking at your page, you can think about it through the same lens. But understand like we know the why, but we also need to know the what. And this creates intention behind behavior. And intention behind behavior is really how we start to make things permanent because that now gives us a reason for doing it. Okay, so let's dive into the 4 constraints of marketing. So in any business, these constraints are going to apply. So 4 constraints look like this. Number 1, clarity. Number 2, collection. Number 3, creation. And number 4, communication. So the 4 C's are the constraints. Yes, you see what I did there with all the C's. I'm going to continue to do that through this video. This is really important because the big takeaway and why this ends up breaking is because the proper order to work through this is to work down in this order, in that order of operations. And the reason this breaks is because most of us try to do it backwards, and we try to do it that way. Because these down here, so the creation and the communication are kind of the obvious components of that. So let me clarify what I mean by each of these. Clarity is, what is the message that we are communicating? Who are we? What are we trying to say? What is it that we're trying to communicate to the end user? Collection is actual collection of assets, right? Taking the video, taking the picture, putting it into share drive, all that kind of stuff. Creation is simply the editing process, right? I'm going to take these raw components or these raw assets and I'm going to make them pretty for forward display. And then lastly, communication. This is distribution. This is taking the finished product, the finished beautification process, and then hitting the post button via whatever mechanism that I'm going to do that. And because these two are the most obvious, we tend to work backwards in that scenario. And it typically falls apart because eventually you run into a couple of different choke points. And I'm going to talk you through why that is the case. But I wanted to give you right up front, what are the 4 constraints? Because once you solve these, now you can create a system. But more importantly, if we're talking about theory of constraints, when we're talking about theory of constraints, all we're really saying is identifying choke points and then solving for those choke points. So if I can tell you where something's going to break, just inherently the human brain starts to wrap itself around the idea of like creating solutions for things that are going to break. But I have to tell you what they are first, or you have to figure out what they are first. And now that you know what they are, you can start to build in mechanisms, process systems, and people that will help you work through this process. And those choke points will free up, at which point you'll have a smooth end-to-end production of an idea all the way to making to a social media platform. Okay, so let's start with the first C, which is clarity. And I talked about this in a previous video, but it sounds a little bit weird, but the way to get clarity is you're going to start with things like mission, vision, core values, and then those will then manifest themselves into what you will see happening inside of your affiliate. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about clarity here, right? But effectively what we're talking about is like, what is your messaging, right? And when we're talking about messaging, one of the key things about separating yourself from other people is it does need to be unique to you and your brand. Otherwise, you're saying the same thing as everybody else. So I'll give you a perfect example. Every CrossFit affiliate that has ever got on a call with us about helping them build a better affiliate, and we ask them, what is unique about your gym? Everybody says the coaches in the community. I mean like 1,000%. Like we were batting 1,000 on that statement. So much to the point where like people get on there and they say that laughingly because we know we're going to be like, probably not. So it needs to be unique, because if everybody's saying the same thing, then it's fundamentally not unique. Now, the messaging, if it is unique, it allows you to be clear, concise, and contextual in your messaging. And this cannot be overstated when we're talking about marketing, right? Spending the time doing this, and I put this eyeball over here because I just wanted to see if I could draw so you guys can make fun of me on the internet, but like getting clear on this allows you to see a lot of things and allows your team to see a lot of things. So when we're thinking about clear, concise, and contextual, these should be pointing directly at your core values, right? So again, inside of Best Hour, one of our core values is affiliates first, meaning like if it's not good for the affiliate, then we're not really going to do it, right? If it's not in your best interest, then we're not going to touch it, which kind of leads into the clear, concise, and contextual nature of what's kind of a promise to you guys, which is like, hey, nobody's going to do less gimmicky shit than we are. And if you guys see how we put those together and why those exist, it starts to make a lot more sense, but it is unique now, right? It is unique to us and what we do and leads into our core values. So starting with those core values is really, really important. If you wanted to get another example, so I can bring this down into the gym level and say, hey, listen, part of our core values inside of CrossFit Rife is love the process. So if I'm thinking about communicating that outwardly, and I think about some things we talked about it in other videos, things that are member attendance related. So if somebody has their 1,000th workout with us at CrossFit Rife, they're going to get a t-shirt, they're going to get a sticker, they're going to get a bunch of other stuff. And then when we communicate that on social media, then what we want to do is like, we want to tell that story, but we want to tell it through the lens of our core values, which is like, this person clearly has taken on board this idea of love the process because they've done 1,000 workouts with us. And we know what the outcome of that is going to be. So taking all of these ideas and understanding how you should be able to take your core values and be able to attach them to things that are happening inside the affiliate are really, really important. So I'll tell you, this was pretty eye-opening for me. I was working through this whole process, and the the guy I was working with, he said, hey, do you have like a client's win channel or somewhere where you collect the positive things that happen inside the affiliate? I was like, oh yeah, we have a Slack channel, it's labeled client wins. He's like, what's in there? I said, well, it's, PRs and, Adrian had a baby and so-and-so lost 20 pounds and they're down, 5% body fat and all that kind of stuff. And he says, are your core values represented in there? And this hit me like a ton of bricks because I immediately got what he was saying. I was like, the things that we were putting in there are kind of, I don't want to say like the lazy version of catching client wins, but they're kind of the lazy version of catching client wins, meaning those are the things that are inherently going to happen if just by default by doing CrossFit. All of that stuff is baked into the cake. But are we really taking a look at what makes our community unique and how we can use that information to communicate to the outside world? So what we did was we started communicating that. So we lined up the core values. And then what you do is you start to communicate different interactions and different behaviors inside of the gym that align with the core values. And when somebody hits their 1,000th workout, you reiterate to the team, you're like, hey, this is an example of love the process. If you have an interaction between a more seasoned athlete and a newer athlete, and they're kind of showing them the ropes and how to set up the squat rack and all that kind of stuff, like that's an example of one of our other core values, which is send the elevator back down, or otherwise stated, share information with people so that they can move up to your level. And what you've done inside of this whole idea of clarity is like, now I'm creating what's described as the Jeep effect. And this is really important, right? So if you've never owned a Jeep, you still will get the idea, right? So this is something Mark England, who's been on the podcast with us before, talks about, which is the reticular activating system, which is in the brain. There's a system inside the brain, which is once I've identified something that is important to me or that I want, the brain starts to become aware of it all the time. So we've had a Jeep. We have a Jeep. We've had one for years. It's an old beater. But the running joke is once you get a Jeep, all you see is Jeeps everywhere. And the reality is like no more people owned Jeeps yesterday than they do today, right? I'm just aware now because I'm in a Jeep that there's a lot of other Jeeps on the road. And it seems like there's Jeeps everywhere. But I was driving by all those same Jeeps yesterday. My brain was blocking them out. Now, how do you use this to your advantage? Like, how do you use this idea of the Jeep effect to your advantage? When you get clear on what it is that you're doing inside of the affiliate and you create a really good vision for yourself and your team, you are now creating the Jeep effect across your team. When you tell them that that is an example of send the elevator back down, that is an example of loving the process, they can't unsee it, just like you can't unsee it. And this is why this is so important, because this is the biggest hang up inside of this entire process of collecting content. And I'll tell you why. Every CrossFit affiliate owner ever bring on somebody to run their social media, and they say, hey, you're going to help me run the social media. The person says, great, I'm here to help you run your social media. And they're like, what do you want me to do? And you're like, capture cool stuff. And we can see why that's a terrible idea, because when I say capture cool stuff, that's subjective. I'm giving them no guidance. And eventually what happens is they get crushed under the burden of trying to be creative, because I gave them no guardrails. I gave them no guidance. I gave them no ideas about what it is that they should be capturing. However, if I reverse engineer that and I have the same scenario, but I say, hey, these are our core values. These are examples of all of these core values that are happening every single day, probably in every single class. And I could even probably tell you before some of them happen when they're going to happen. And then now I can send this person out there and be like, now I want you to go capture that. What I want you to do is I just want to make sure they have smiling faces and all that stuff and make sure they look cool and they're not making some ridiculous face while they're working out. So I really want to emphasize the importance of getting clarity, because this is the number one hangup. If you cannot get this part done, this is why people who are making content fall off eventually, because there's no clarity around why they're doing it. They just got excited about creating content, and that excitement went away because they're like, this is actually kind of hard to collect content. And they're trying to randomly catch content or randomly come up with ideas. Now, if you want me to give you a coaching example of this, meaning look with intention, anytime we're looking at a level 2 and I'm working with an athlete, say they're looking around, let's just say they're looking at the push jerk. I don't know what it is. I say, hey, what do you see? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, cool, where are you looking? What are you looking at? And they're like, I'm looking at, to make sure that they're extending the hips and punching the arms, and they got active shoulders, and they land with their heels on the ground. And I'm like, do you really think it's possible to see all of that at one time? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, you can't, because you just called 7 reps and you didn't say anything. And it's not because you can't see. It's because you're not looking with intention. So we'll run it back and I'll say, hey, only look at the knee. Just look at the knee and tell me, does the knee go to extension or does it stay bent? And every single time, they'll get it 100% correct 100% of the time. Their eyesight's not any better than it was 5 reps ago. They're just looking with intention now. And now they can see that that knee is flexed versus extended. And it's the same thing here. When you look with intention to try to catch these moments that are happening inside of your gym, you tend to catch a lot more of them over time.
All right, guys, if you like this content, please subscribe to the podcast. But understand, we work with affiliates. If you are interested in building your business, understanding strategy, building a better community, and building better coaches and careers for them, hit the link somewhere around this video, and we'd love to have a call with you. I get asked all the time, what gym software should a gym owner use? And the short answer is, I don't care. What I care about is that companies like PushPress design software that helps gym owners run better businesses. So if you're working with a software company, you're not happy, and you don't know what to do with the information that software gives you every single day, check out PushPress. They've got built-in systems like the 180-day journey that we helped them build inside of PushPress Grow that'll help you interact with your clients at a better clip in order to improve your retention. So if that's something you're interested, reach out to those guys at PushPress and help you run a better box today.
So once you get clarity down, what happens is clarity ends up driving collection. And this is a really cool kind of what I described as a self-licking ice cream cone. If everybody knows what we're looking for, it becomes a lot easier for us to actually capture the moments because everybody's got a phone. If you've got the budget for it, you can buy equipment that goes in the gym, some sort of DJI cameras and things like that with gimbals on there. But fundamentally, we've gotten over the hump of when I tell my coaches what to capture, they now know what to capture. They now know what to look for. And you get to the point where you can almost anticipate it over time. You're like, oh, it's about to happen right there. That person hit a PR. Somebody's going to high five them. Maybe I can capture that. Now, we won't get into the whole rigmarole about like, should you be, taking photos and videos while you're coaching, because you shouldn't. But it doesn't matter. Now I can bring somebody else in to capture those moments. Because when you don't have the clarity, you end up collecting a bunch of stuff that's not usable. And there's nothing more annoying than that. So years ago, I brought in a photographer because hey, we needed to get some more photos on the website. And I was like, hey, just come in and, just fire away. And what I found out was like the person that was shooting the photos had certain things that they like to see, right? So what I ended up getting was a ton of what are really cool pictures, but they're of people like lifting heavy weights and doing muscle ups and people with veins popping out of their neck. And if you're a CrossFit junkie, that's really cool. That is not, however, what I want going on my website, right? So my lack of ability to create clarity to get the proper collection is why that broke down, because that's not the pictures that I wanted on there. The pictures I want on my website were like people high-fiving the coaches, smiling, normal people doing what people can do. And that was because I did not have clarity. So when you think about how this trickles down and how you can end up, even if you are getting good collection, you're not going to get the right stuff. And I want to get the right stuff so that I can communicate the right message. So understand how clarity leads into collection. Now, we don't need to overcomplicate collection, right? Tell people to collect however they can. If they've got it on their phone, if you've got, gym assets, whether it be cameras or another phone that you keep there so people can snap pictures, tell them what you want them to capture it on, and then tell them where you want them to share it, right? Whether it's a Google Drive or a Dropbox or something like that. But in this process of collection, your job in this process is to remove friction. Make it easy for them to capture the information and give it to you so that you can move on to the next step. So we've got clarity, we've got collection, and then we'll talk about how that bleeds over into the creation. Okay, now creation is simply just editing. Now, there are varying degrees of editing. So Nate is sitting over here. Nate has more camera equipment and editing skills than I ever care to acquire or think about. So that's not the level of editing that we're looking for, okay? So it is for us, but like not necessarily for you guys, right? When we're thinking about editing, think about what is the simplest common denominator, what is the easiest way to get that product to the street. So if you're thinking about using Instagram, there are organic or native tools inside of there that you can edit photos and videos with. Outside of that, there are a ton of other third-party apps and softwares that will do a lot of this stuff for you, that will do much of the heavy lifting. So when you're talking about editing, make it easy on yourself. You do not have to go over the top on editing, because the reality is most people don't know the difference between super high-end editing and mid-tier editing. And that doesn't mean that super high-end editing is not better. It's just like you're talking about somebody who doesn't know what they're looking at. And most people who are scrolling through Instagram at the speed of light are not going to pick up on one versus the other. So make it good enough, right? And if you need to, then you can hire out to a third party, right? You can go out to Fiverr, and there's companies that will do, pretty simple editing for you, and they can do it at scale. Just understand, like, that's now a cost out of your pocket that you're gonna have to budget for and execute on a monthly basis. So really think through what you want that to be. If you've got somebody who's pretty good using the native tools to Instagram, and then you can direct them with both clarity and collection, you're starting to put together a winning formula here, which is really, really cool. So when it gets into creation, don't overdo it. That's my number one rule when it comes to editing, is do not overdo it, because you don't know what is going to work yet. Just make sure that it's good enough and get it out, and know that nobody's looking at your shit anyway. That's just the nature of it, right? Like, you have a handful of people that are looking at it. Outside of that, we all have the attention span of a gnat, and we're going to forget 5 minutes from now anyway. So do not get caught up in the creation. This constraint right here is self-inflicted when we're talking about creation. So people incriminate here, or they self-inflict wounds on themselves because they get so caught up in creation when it's just not necessary. Get something that is good enough and get it out on the street, okay? Because we want to get to the actual point where we hit the post when we get to communication. Okay, now you got to the end and you want to publish this on whatever platform it is: Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. So when we're talking about communication, we're simply just talking about hitting post. So making sure that that content goes out into the internet. Now, if you really want to get organized with this, your best bet is to batch all of this content and then schedule it out over time, right? So you can use something like HubSpot, Later, Tailwind. There's a ton of different softwares and third-party applications that will allow you to do this. Now, that's actually the easy part. The hard part that comes along with this is whatever that video, that reel, or that picture is, it has to have the accompanying copy to go with it, right? So we need to understand that the communication is not just the visual, but is the copy that goes with it, okay? And copy, believe it or not, is still important. The good part is, with AI, with things like ChatGPT, you do not have to be a specialist in copywriting. What you do need to be good at is prompting it to give the right tone and message with regard to creating copy. So if you want to create a thread inside of ChatGPT, feed it a bunch of information about your gym, who you guys are, what you're about. Feed it your core values, feed it your mission statement, tell it your backstory, tell it about your members, tell it all this stuff, and tell it what you want it to communicate. So you do have to guide it. You have to put the bumpers on, and you have to give it its left and right lateral limits so that it refines it. And you can say, make this an Instagram post, and it will give you copy. And if you don't like it, you can just refine it. Hey, make it more casual, make it funny, make it sarcastic. All of that stuff can be done at scale and can be done very, very, very quickly. But understand, the copy does still matter. And thinking about, hey, I want to have a thoughtful call to action, or I don't want any call to action on this, or I want to highlight this person, I want to tell their story and make them look like a hero. Again, in the age of AI, this is something where, like, that is a tool that can be used to help you get really good at writing engaging copy that matches the engaging content that you just captured by going through this whole process. So again, we're not going to go super into the details, because all of these tools and tricks, like, those things change by the hour, and what's working today, that some of that stuff will be obsolete tomorrow. But if you understand how this process works, it's not going to matter what the tool is. You're just going to know how to work it, and you're just going to transfer that from one platform to the next as things evolve. Okay, so you understand the 4 constraints, and just to reiterate how this whole process works is, in any given process, it's just a flow from left to right. I want whatever it is that I'm looking to flow smoothly from left to right. And when you draw it like this, like, these become natural choke points. And these are the things that I have to solve for. And if you understand why these choke points would exist, whether it be between clarity and collection, or between collection and creation, or creation and communicate, again, you can start to create solutions for all of these. So again, just recap. It's going to be really hard to get mass collection if we're not clear on what it is that we're capturing. And if I'm not going to have good collection, meaning I don't have enough assets in order to distribute them, then I'm going to spending a ton of time trying to create and edit 1 to 2 videos, which is worthless. At which point, I'm not really going to enjoy the process of posting it, because it's not going to get shared. My members aren't going to appreciate it. And now this becomes a death spiral downward. So again, looking at these different choke points, Again, you guys can come up with your own solutions for those, and a lot of you will because you like certain tools versus other ones, but understanding the constraints are what matter. Once you've identified the strengths, come up with solutions for those, because once you have the solutions, I've got a smooth process left for right, and now I can introduce other people into the process, and I'm not burdening one person who happens to have an eye for capturing content or happens to kind of know what's going on inside of the gym or happens to kind of know how to use some editing tools. I can start to lay all this out so that anybody and almost anybody could get something from start to finish, and it would fall within the realm of what it is that we're looking for. It might not be perfect. It's not going to be exactly what you're looking for. It will have some flaws inside of it, but ultimately it would get done. And really understanding why this ends up falling apart inside of the affiliate is the first step. Outside of that, then you just got to start putting in a plan and create behaviors inside of your team and get everybody together and figure out how you guys are going to do that. Okay. So now that we've covered all of the constraints inside of marketing, I want to bring this down into the real world and talk to you about how you can use this effectively inside of your gym. So we're going to go full tactical assault here. And I'm going to give you guys this method in combination with the best organic lead generation tool that we've ever done. We're going to talk about how to apply this concept to Bring a Friend Week. Okay, so let's talk about the 4 C's as they apply to something very specific like Bring a Friend Week. So again, clarity, collection, creation, and comms. So Bring a Friend Week, again, is basically just a system to get warm leads or referrals inside of the building. I'm going to walk through that in detail here in just a second, but let's talk about how I would apply the 4 C's here. Number 1 is get clarity, right? Meaning understand, you and your team should understand how and why this idea of Bring a Friend Week applies to you. So I'll give you guys how it applies to us with regard to CrossFit Ripe and our core values. So our coaches know and our community know that, hey, listen, it's about sending the elevator back down or sharing that information with other people. And that's a unique way for us to communicate that to our clients. It's like, hey, we want you guys to share this information with other people because we know that it's valuable to you. And we can communicate it that way instead of just saying, hey, bring your friends. I can communicate it in a way that is unique to us. And remember, unique makes you sticky. And that's where you're trying to be when you're communicating when it comes to marketing. Now, from a collection standpoint, I highly recommend you just designate somebody for that week, even if it's just you, for collection of all of the assets, right? If you're going to use your phone, if you're going to use your phone plus a lav mic, if you're going to use something like a DJI with a gimbal, just make sure whatever the tool is that you're going to use for collection, that somebody is designated for that. Because if you just leave it up to everybody, then nobody's going to collect it because everybody's just going to assume that the other person did it. So make sure that you identify that person by name and tell them what it is that you expect them to do. Now, when it comes to creation, really all you need to do there is you need to decide which tools you're going to use. Are you going to use the tools that are organic to or native to Instagram? Or are you going to use third-party editing software? Completely up to you. Just make sure you've made that decision beforehand and the person who's going to be involved in that process understands how to use the tools. Again, don't overcomplicate it. Do not over-edit. Do not overproduce the content. It doesn't need to be done that way. The stories by themselves, if you're capturing the right moments, are more than enough to do the trick. And then lastly, comms, right? So post with the copy that speaks to your box, going back up there to number 1, right? Whatever your third-party distribution platform is going to be, or you're going to post directly from your phone, that's totally fine too. But understand, like when you create that copy, it should reinforce the clarity that we started with so that the image matches the copy and it communicates the message that we're looking for. So this is how you would apply something like the 4 C's to something like Bring a Friend Week. But now what I want to do is I want to walk you through Bring a Friend Week because again, if you're not using this tool, you're just insane, quite frankly. I don't know why you wouldn't. If you don't want to, by all means, don't. But I'm going to talk to you about like why you should use it and why it works. Okay, so we're going to dive into Bring a Friend Week. If you guys have been following any of our content, many of you kind of know how this already works. But for those of you that are new, understand that like we have run this across well over 1,000 gyms, probably closer to 2,000, many of which that work with us, many of which that don't, and it works. So this is not even joking responsible for bringing millions of dollars of recurring revenue into affiliates, and it works. But it's not just about Bring a Friend Week. It's about how you execute Bring a Friend Week. So I want to walk through some of the mechanisms of Bring a Friend Week. But fundamentally, like why does this matter to you? Why would you do this? And the real reason why you do this is like you're trying to drive referrals into your business. Why? Like we want referrals. And every business should have a good referral program. Now, why do you want a good referral program? We'll get to that in just a second. But like first, we need to define what is a referral program. So a program is going to be defined as an offer plus a vehicle. What do I mean by that? Okay. A program constitutes both of those. Most CrossFit affiliates just have an offer, meaning they say, hey, we have a referral offer, which is if you bring a friend, you get X or they get X or whatever that's going to be. But if I don't have a vehicle with which to drive the offer on a consistent basis, then it fundamentally cannot be called a program. And the way we determine whether it's an effective program or not, or whether it's a program or not, is how often am I getting referrals? If I'm getting a lot of referrals, then it is probably a program because it contains both of these things, both the offer and the vehicle. So we're going to talk about the offer in a minute, but the vehicle is Bring a Friend Week. Okay. So we're creating the vehicle, and then we're going to slide the offer into the vehicle, and then we're going to deliver that to people on a consistent basis. I created it kind of accidentally years ago. So we've been running Bring a Friend Week at CrossFit Rife. That's where it originated for well over 6 years. We just had one maybe 4 weeks ago, and we had 34 people show up. So understand, like, you can run this for a very long time and will still be highly effective at the affiliate. Now, the why behind this is really important, because at the end of the day, when we're talking about bringing leads into your affiliate, understand that referrals are warm leads, which are the best leads. They're low cost and they are high retention. And all that leads to for you, an affiliate, is this. I don't know any gym ever that doesn't want all three of those things. Like, that is the mecca of leads. It's a warm lead, meaning they're coming from somebody that you know, which means they probably are being accompanied with some sort of social proof because their friend told them to come to the gym. They're not going to cost you a ton of money with regard to like your actual cost of acquisition, and they are most likely to have the highest retention of leads that you have coming in the building. That makes you a happy affiliate owner. So I don't know any gym owner that doesn't want that. If you don't want that, by all means, don't do it. But this is why you want to create a good referral program, because this really starts to solidify your acquisition channels. And speaking of acquisition channels, when we're talking about risk inside of a business, this is something called channel risk, right? So Keith Cunningham originally called it acquisition risk, and then Alex Hormozi has also talked about it. He refers it to as channel risk. And what we mean by that is there's your box, right? And then there's going to be a certain number of inputs with regard to leads that come into your box, right? And the idea is I would want to have as many of those as possible and a good balance across those as possible. Now, the reality is that most affiliates have one, which is either their website or maybe they're running ads, right? But they're left with just those two, which means I'm missing multiple other channels, right? But if I can increase that and I can add something back in like outbound, meaning I'm going to be reaching out to old clients via email, and I've got a good referral program, understand what you are doing to your affiliate long-term, which is you are decreasing your channel risk, which means if I take one of these away, I still have the ability to grow my business and bring in new business into the affiliate. But if you're not running ads, which is, again, that's a whole nother discussion by itself, you have no outbound strategy and you don't have a referral offer, then you're relegated to only having one channel for inbound traffic. And that is what we would define as a risky business. So we want to make sure that this becomes part of our overall strategy, because long-term, like I said, if you want to grow a high value business and you want to have fun inside of your box every single day, you're going to have to solve this eventually. So start solving it now. Okay, now let's talk about getting into the mechanics of how I'm going to execute Bring a Friend Week. So when we talk about that, the first thing we need to determine is like, what's the frequency with which we are going to run this promotion or run this play. And what we tell people is like, for sure you want to run it 3 times a year, maybe 4 on the high end. But at the end of the day, 3 tends to be the sweet spot. 4, what we find is 4 just tends to be kind of feels like you're forcing it. However, if you don't have a lot going on in your calendar and you can throw a 4th one on there, go ahead and put it in there. But what we tend to find, if you do this over a long enough period of time, your calendar starts to fill up, and 3 tends to be something where it still performs really well and it doesn't feel really stressful. Now, the thing you need to think about with regard to frequency is not just like what is the frequency, but where on the calendar is it going to perform best? So it's how often am I going to do it, and then where do I put it? So I will tell you this right out of the gate: it does not need to be perfectly spaced out, meaning it doesn't not need to be every 4 months. Because if I'm looking for 3 times a year and I'm going to go every 4 months, put it on the place in the calendar that is going to be optimal for attendance. So I'll give you some kind of rough time periods on the calendar where they tend to perform well. And I can tell you where you should not put it. So back end of January, early February tends to perform pretty well because everybody's coming off the holidays and is back into a normal routine. If you are going to go late December, early January, typically does not perform well because people are still kind of in the holiday funk and they still got a lot of stuff going on. After that, if you're going to get one in Q4, my recommendation is try to get it in before Thanksgiving. Once you get to Thanksgiving, now travel schedules start to pick up. So you want to get it in probably somewhere in that like August, September timeframe. Again, when people are coming back and getting kids in school and people start to settle out with their schedules. And then outside of that, something in that April, May timeframe tends to pan out well. A lot of people like to do it maybe even at the close of the open or like around Murph because people like that event and it's a big kind of a big pillar event inside of the CrossFit community. But at the end of the day, I want you to put it where it's going to perform best. What you'll find is that as you run this year over year over year, you'll find where it performs better on the calendar versus 1 month versus the next. And if you need to move it to the left or the right 1 or 2 months, move it to the left or the right a couple months because I'm going to get 35 or 40 leads versus 12, and I'm going to take that higher inflow rather than the lower one. So once you understand frequency, then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about promotion. Okay, now I want to kind of beat this drum with regard to promotion. Now, when we're talking about promotion, if something is time constrained, it is an event, it's really hard to over promote it. And what we typically tell people is like, you're going to promote this for 4 to 6 weeks. And the reason it's hard to over promote it is because logically in our brains, if it has an end date, it makes sense for somebody to continue to remind me about it all the time. Now, if you were just, and this is what I call the mayonnaise effect. If I give you 2 scenarios and you walking down the street and a person walks by you and they're eating a sandwich that happens to have mayonnaise on it, you probably wouldn't think anything of it. However, if somebody walked by you and they're eating mayonnaise out of a jar, you'd be like, that's kind of weird, right? And gross, right? I'm not a big fan of mayonnaise, but even if it was something I did like mustard, like it would still be weird, right? Just somebody eating mustard out of a jar. The reason it's weird is not because it's mayonnaise or it's mustard. The reason it's weird is because it's out of place, right? There's no vehicle for the mayonnaise, right? And that would be like you running around the gym, yelling at everybody, be like, hey, do you know that we have a referral offer with no context, no event, nothing to attach it to? It's out of place. So the way that we can allow ourselves to continue to do this at high volume is we attach it to Bring a Friend Week. We attach the mayonnaise, which is the offer, to the sandwich, which is Bring a Friend Week. And that's why you wouldn't notice if you had 15 people walk by you eating sandwiches with mayonnaise on it, because it's a sandwich. That makes perfect sense. So if I have a proper combination of both the vehicle and the offer, this gives me the ability to over promote it in a lot of instances, meaning you can send out a 12 email sequence campaign. You can announce it at every single class. You can have posters at the whiteboard. And what I'm doing is people know the event's coming, the event's coming, the event's coming, right? If you wanted to use the CrossFit Games as an example, if the CrossFit Games is typically late July, early August, if I'm starting to get, I don't know, CrossFit Games emails in September about the following year, that's going to be really annoying, right? But now, if it's in open season, right, in the CrossFit Open, which is where the kind of the first qualifying component for CrossFit Games, it makes perfect sense for them to be promoting the games. Why? Because that event is now in flight, right? So they can send as many emails as they want. And while the frequency might be annoying to some degree, it's still not out of place. I understand why they're sending the emails, right? They're trying to promote an event that's upcoming. So understand how promotion works and how you can look at that from a standpoint of like upping the frequency of your communication, right? As long as it's logical to the brain and as long as it's in the right place at the right time, you can do it as much as you want. Now, the last thing is with regard to programming, right? So you're going to be bringing in a bunch of people, hopefully, that may or may not have done CrossFit before. But let's assume that at the very least that they are beginners. In best case scenario, they have some familiarity with CrossFit. When we're talking about programming, if you're a programming nerd and you love the spreadsheets and you love the competition season, I empathize with you. I get it. But this week's not the week for that, right? So what we tell people is make it simple, not easy, right? If you do not heed my warning here, Bring a Friend Week will not go well, right? Simple, not easy. What do I mean by that? Make the movements simple. you don't have to necessarily make the workouts easy because that's going to annoy your current members, but you should make the movement simple. So leave all the complex stuff out that week. No 3-position hang snatch, no muscle ups, no rope climbs, no handstand walking, right? You can get all that stuff the following week. The whole purpose of this week is to bring people in, to show them that they can do CrossFit, not the opposite, right? If you bring them in and you do Amanda on day one, that's just not a good idea, right? You're going to take the 2 most complex things we have in CrossFit and deliver those in a shit sandwich to them on their first day. You're not going to get a W out of that one, I promise you. So we really want to think about it. You don't have to throw your programming out the window, right? And if you make your programming slightly more simple, again, not easy for 1 week, nobody's going to lose any fitness in that week, right? I promise you everybody's going to be just fine. But this is somewhere where people get really dogmatic about programming and they don't understand that like you're actually hurting the business by not dialing that back just a little bit to simplify and make it simple. Again, not necessarily easy. I want my coaches that week to be able to engage with people, not worry about where their hands are going to go in the barbell snatch, okay? So keep the movements very simple, the basics, squat, press, pull, running, burpees, rowing, all that kind of stuff. It'll be a great week, I promise you. If you do this correctly, it's one of the best weeks of the year every single time, hands down. Okay, the last component of this is how do you build the offer? How do you build a referral offer? So to clarify our stance on referrals, right? Or actually, clarification, to clarify our stance on discounts. So we are not opposed to discounts. We are opposed to discounts that literally make no sense, right? However, if I make discounts or will replace discounts with incentives that create a benefit for both parties involved, meaning the business and the consumer, we're totally down for that kind of stuff. However, in a lot of instances, when we look at pricing structures, they're typically only beneficial to the consumer, which is not a good business move. And those things don't have to be at odds. So when we think about creating a good offer, we want to think about both parties, and I want it to be a logical conclusion. So what we look at is statistically, if you kind of look at some of the market research, 30% is enough to get a consumer's attention, meaning 30% discount on something says, hey, I'm interested on that. Like that catches my attention. That seems like a lot. Okay. So, hey, more is better. So what we typically say is make the discount 40%. Now, why do we come up with 40%? It wasn't because we just think more is better because we're CrossFitters, but mathematically, if you do this, you can't lose on the transaction in the context of that singular month. Now, what do I mean by that? Like, does that math actually math? Yes, it does. So let's just say that we'll use easy math here. Let's just say that I have one member paying me $100, okay? And the discount is 40%. So that means the discount here is going to be $40. Okay? Now, they're going to bring in their friend, and the key component to this is a give-get component, meaning I'm going to give them a 40% discount, and they're going to get, and I'm going to get a 40% discount, right? So the key components here, it's give and get. Both of us are going to get a 40% discount in this transaction, right? So I'm going to get $40 off, and they're going to get $40 off, okay? Now, why does this math? Because before this, I was collecting $100. If I collect both of these inside of this referral transaction, that is $60 times 2, or $120, which means in this transaction, I'm up 20%. Now, that's just in the context of 1 month, and we haven't even talked about anything like an onboarding cost of any sort, right? So I'm going to be up in that transaction. Once you get to 50-50, then it's going to be a net out. It's going to be a net zero for you, but as long as you keep it in the 40%, you're going to still net 20% on the transaction that month. And in the following month, you're going to be up 100% on that because they brought you business. And I will tell you, if you're looking at $40 for cost of acquisition, I will take that deal all day long, and you should too. Okay. Now let's go back to the give get. So this is a really important concept with regard to building an offer. It's important that you incentivize both parties when you do this. So I've done this every which way possible. You incentivize just your member, you incentivize just the other person, and both of those perform significantly worse than rewarding both people in this scenario. Reward them both. You want to create a scenario where I have 2 happy clients at the end of this, not just one. Because in a lot of instances, if you only reward one or the other, I've got one person who's going to be very happy that I discount, and maybe your member didn't get anything out of that transaction. And they're like, hey, I just brought this person in and brought you business, and I didn't get anything for it. Again, I'm going to end up turning a happy client into an unhappy client in that scenario. And as long as you design this mathematically correctly, correctly, you should have no problem rewarding both people. And I would even go so far as into a lot of scenarios, like if one person brings in 3 people, pay that person out, because the long tail financially far outweighs whatever you're going to pay them on the front end. You should absolutely take that deal every day of the week and twice on Sunday. So when you're building the offer, these are the 2 musts inside of building the offer. Don't make it financially infeasible for yourself, and make sure that you're rewarding both parties when you do this. If you keep in line with these 2 components right here, you're going to have a really killer offer that people are going to take over and over and over and over. I've had scenarios in my gym where we bring somebody in, we tell them that we have a referral offer. They the next week brought in another person. We tell that person that we have a referral offer. That person brought in another person. And then it happened one more time. So simply by having a referral offer, I got 3 additional clients off of that in a matter of about 2.5 weeks. And again, that's free business that I didn't get before, right? Simply by having an offer that was well designed and making me ask when you do it. So that's Bring a Friend Week. Like I said, take it. I'm putting it on a silver platter for you. I highly recommend you use it. Again, at the end of the day, it works. We've run this through enough affiliates enough times at this point, like quite literally thousands of times, that if it doesn't work, the sad part is it's you, okay? And again, that's probably because you're only taking part of the equation and using it. Run the play is what I tell everybody. Run the play, run it in a way that feels natural to you, but don't start making audibles on the play until you can run it effectively. Okay? Now, inside of this whole video, I hope you guys have gotten really clear on how you can start creating better content and creating systems for that, and then how you can apply the 4 C's and the 4 constraints inside of marketing to something like Bring a Friend Week so that you can drive more traffic in your gym. Because at the end of the day, all I want for you guys is to be able to grow and build a better box so that you can impact more people, drive more professional development inside of your gym, make better coaches, and create happier, healthier people all over the planet, because we know CrossFit does that for everybody. So I hope this video helps. If you guys have questions about any of this, if you want help building your box, there's a link somewhere around this video. You can click that link, set up a call with our team, and we'll be happy to walk you through with what it is that we can do for you. Outside of that, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the Best Hour of Their Day podcast. We appreciate you listening and choosing to have us help you in your passion for coaching and affiliate ownership. You can find more episodes just like this on all podcast platforms. If you're interested in learning more, you can reach out to us on any social media platforms, or you can visit www.besthouroftheirday.com to book a call. If you found this episode helpful for you, please share it so that we can help other coaches and affiliate owners to help build a bigger and stronger CrossFit community. Thanks for listening.